or VCIB. We are the only bank in Canada that focuses exclusively on working with organizations that drive social, economic, and environmental change. At VCIB, we are exploring ways to bank with impact, to do what's right for the people and planet, with a focus on energy and housing. Climate change is here, and it affects all of us. In 2021, VCIB's financing supported innovative clean energy projects that avoided 4,300 tons of carbon emissions. At the same time, the real estate market continues to soar, making the need for more affordable alternatives more stark every month. In 2021, VCIB helped create or preserve nearly 1,200 affordable housing units. Today, we put the issues that matter at the forefront of the election. Regardless of the outcome, we aim to work collectively with government and business leaders to make real, tangible change at this critical time. Good luck to all those participating in the debate today. We look forward to hearing your innovative ideas and solutions. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming, everyone. My name is Iman Berry, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm representing an organization called Green Ummah. I am a co-founder as well as a board member. Green Ummah works to bring education about the environment to Muslim communities all over Canada. I'm very much excited to be here for today's debate on the environment and interrelated issues in Brampton North. In order to demonstrate how these are nonpartisan issues and ensure that all constituents get to hear from their candidates in their riding, we invited candidates from all the major parties to today's debate. Today, we are joined by two candidates, Harinder Malhi of the Liberal Party and Anip Dhad of the Green Party. We will be going over the following topics: the environment, economy and jobs, social support, transportation, health, climate change, housing, reconciliation, and resources. We will then jump into some audience questions. Some have been pre-submitted during the registration period, but audience members will also have the chance to ask their questions by writing them in the Q&A section, which you will see at the bottom of your screen. The candidates are going to start with some introductions and will finish the debate with some concluding remarks. We will also be using wildcards during this debate. Candidates will get 3 wildcards each to use throughout the debate. At the end of each question, after all candidates have provided a response, I will ask if anyone wants to use one of their wildcards. Each wildcard allows for 1 extra minute for the candidates to elaborate on their response and/or respond to another candidate's statement. Candidates, our timekeeper Sarah will hold up cards at 60 seconds, 30 seconds, and then when your time is up. After I pose each question, I will read the order in which you will respond. Please also remember to keep yourself on mute whenever you are not speaking and not talk over or interrupt any other candidates. I would also like to note that today's debate is in an online format and over a dinner hour. And with that, we will be recording this debate to share later on many social media platforms where many people all over Brampton North will be able to use as a reference. In terms of ground rules, all debate participants, candidates, and attendees must remain respectful towards one another. There will be absolutely no tolerance for hate speech, personal attacks towards other candidates or other participants, or anything of the like. Such behavior will be grounds for removal from the debate. I would now like to invite both of the candidates to introduce themselves. The order is first Liberal and then Green Party.
Thank you very much. My name is Harinder Malhi, and I'm your Ontario Liberal candidate from Brampton North. To begin with introducing myself, I have served as a school board trustee, wards 9 and 10, in the city of Brampton. From there, I went on to serving as an MPP for Brampton Springdale. And from there, I also had the opportunity to serve as the minister responsible for the status of women in Ontario. For the last 3.5 years, I've worked with a not-for-profit organization in the city of Brampton, as well as returning to school to get my MBA from the Rotman School of Management. The last couple of years have been difficult for nearly everyone in Ontario. We have all felt the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and for many Ontarians, that pain really began 4 years ago. With cuts to education and cuts to healthcare, the Ford government started to dismantle what Ontarians cherish the most. So that is why I believe that this is an important forum for us. I want to thank you for having me here today and giving us a platform to share our thoughts and opinions as we move forward on important issues that matter to the residents of Brampton North.
Anib, I think you're next.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I am also extremely honored to be the representative for Brampton North, representing the Green Party. A little bit about myself. I worked with the public sector, specifically the Ontario government, for about 15 years. And then after that, pursued a career in the finance sector. I was able at that time to have the opportunity to work with ministries that dealt with education, as well as environmental issues, infrastructure, intergovernmental priorities, and things like that. I'm very excited about the chance to be able to be here and talk a little bit more about climate priorities. Obviously, as a Green candidate, this is a huge, huge priority for me. And I think a very big one for the residents of Brampton North as well. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here where we can get into some really good debate and conversation about how we can have a better way forward into the future.
Thank you, candidates. I'll now go into our questions on the topic of the environment. The question is, the City of Brampton and the region of Peel both declared a climate emergency and have launched a not-for-profit organization, the Center for Community Energy Transformation, to help residents and businesses in the city increase energy efficiencies and move to more sustainable energy sources, thereby reducing the city's carbon footprint. Much of this initiative involves helping residents move away from natural gas heating to electrical ground source or air source heat pumps. That implies using low carbon electricity. If elected, what would your government specifically do to ensure that Ontario's electrical grid generates most of its power from low carbon or no carbon sources? First, I'll have Aneep go ahead, and then Harinder, you can go ahead.
Thank you for the question. So I think it's a great one and a very timely one. The progression to renewables is huge, and there's going to be a future demand for skills as well as technologies related to the new green economy. Part of that is, of course, phasing out fossil fuels and electricity generated from anything with a carbon footprint. So investing in renewables like solar, hydro, wind, other ways that we can actually start to use new types of energy, or at least mitigate existing ones as well, are things that the Greens will look into. Cutting carbon pollution in half by 2030 is something that the Greens are committed to, as well as net zero by 2045. Doubling Ontario's electricity supply by 2040 and make Ontario's electricity emission free as quickly as possible is also a priority of the Greens. And this is just to also make sure that we're providing opportunities to help existing buildings and homes retrofit as well, so that they can derive power from other clean sources also.
Okay. So can I begin? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. You can just begin after the other candidate has finished speaking.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. It is important to remember that the Ontario Liberal Party was the first government in this country to take the climate crisis seriously. Our government eliminated dirty coal from the energy supply mix and from the jurisdiction to do so, and had the jurisdiction to do so in North America. This was equivalent to eliminating 7 million cars from the road, or for further perspective, every car in Ontario. We also partnered with both Quebec and California to create the first cap and trade system in North America. Of course, the Ontario PCs withdrew this successful climate accord, which in turn forced the federal government to impose a carbon tax on Ontario, essentially removing the responsibility of the large corporate polluters and placing a higher burden on Ontario residents. This is just another short-sightedness from the Ford government. And additionally, the Ford government then went on to cancel green renewable projects that were already in process of construction, costing hundreds and millions of dollars to the Ontario taxpayer in cancellation penalties. We will work very hard to make Ontario's energy grid the cleanest in the country. We are committed to cutting Ontario's carbon pollution in half by 2030 and creating 25,000 green jobs and training people for them.
Thank you, candidates. Would anyone like to use their wild card? You can just begin if you would like to use your wild card. If not, we will move on to our next question. On the topic of economy and jobs, the city of Brampton has committed almost 21 million in seed money to bring in an innovation district to downtown Brampton that will foster technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. If elected, how will your government support this initiative to create highly skilled employment opportunities for Brampton's workforce? First, I'll have Harinder go, and then Aneep, you can go ahead.
I feel that we must continue to attract post-secondary education opportunities to Brampton. This will raise the profile of our city and lead companies to come back to Brampton to hire the best and the brightest. And our government will work hand in hand with municipalities to deliver a more environmentally friendly future. Like I said earlier, we are committed to creating 25,000 green jobs and training people for them.
Thank you. I'll jump in now if that's okay. So just to build on that, the Greens have mentioned that reevaluating and taking a look at the type of courses and curriculum that are available to students with respect to skills and trades that will be needed for the green economy is part and parcel of what will inform the attraction of skilled green jobs to the area as well. What I would also point to is as we build towards a future green economy and infrastructure and tech that we'll need with renewables, this is also something that will help foster that growth and that attraction to the area in terms of people needing the skills that will help to take us there as well.
Would any of the candidates like to use their wild card? That sounds good. Next question, again on the topic of economy and jobs. A 2021 report by the Ontario Living Wage Network found that residents in the Peel region would need to make $19.80 per hour to cover the cost of basic necessities like food, water, and shelter. This means that Ontario's current minimum wage does not meet the provincial wide cost of living. As MPP, how do you work to ensure that all Ontarians are able to make a livable wage in Ontario? I'll have the Liberal Party go first and then the Green Party.
Thank you. So as we've talked about as a part of our affordability platform, the Liberal Party of Ontario is committed to raising minimum wage to $16 an hour immediately. This was something that was in progress when we were in government in 2018. And of course, Doug Ford came into power and decided to delay that increase in minimum wage until an election year and during a campaign. So we are committed to the continuing increase of minimum wage. Initially, we're committed to a $16 minimum wage, but going forward, we would like to consult on a living wage and introduce what would be an affordable living wage for Ontarians and for the residents of Brampton North.
And I would just continue to say that the Greens have committed to matching that, but starting at increasing the floor of the minimum wage each year by $1, and then looking at possible top-ups that would take into consideration the cost of living of specific cities as well. And I think this is great in terms of not only promising that we will be able to work towards a livable wage where people can actually have a life, a good one, a decent one for the hard work that they do, but it's also showing that we're willing to have a collaborative approach towards how we determine, the needs base of, how that's allocated and the formulas that we use. So, if you're living somewhere that is more expensive, knowing that maybe there's relief that's kind of equal to what you would need there, I'm sure is good news to a lot of people. But that is something that the Greens have indicated they will work towards going forward.
Thank you, candidates. Would anyone like to use their wild card? Perfect. Thank you. Next, on the topic of social support. A significant percentage of residents living in Brampton North work in the healthcare, logistics, retail, and food sourcing industries. The recent pandemic has cast a light on the plight of many of these workers, including part-time or contract nature of work, lack of protective equipment, lack of paid sick leave, and low wage relative to the importance of the work performed. If elected, how would your government help support the workers of Brampton North? I'll have the Liberal Party go ahead and then the Green Party.
Thank you. And I mean, this is a key pillar of our affordability platform. We believe that our workers have not been, and that the workers of Ontario have not been treated fairly. We had introduced extra paid sick days, which again, the Ford government came in and canceled. We're committed to 10 sick days per for any employee in the province, 10 paid sick days, so that they can take care of their families, they can take care of themselves. Because I agree with you, during the pandemic, we saw loud and clear that families were struggling. Families were struggling with educating their children, being sick, or working in these frontline jobs that were actually considered essential during the pandemic, and they couldn't walk away. They had tough decisions to make, and we need to protect our employees, our staff, and everybody in this province from having to make those tough decisions, from having to choose between their family and between their employment, because both are equally important for them to put food on the table for their families. I am 100%. I think that for all of our temporary workers or people who may be working in those situations, we also want to introduce a portable benefits package so that everybody has access to benefits in Ontario, at least pharmaceuticals, eye care, dental care. So we're committed to that portable package as well. Portable benefits package for everyone. I think that having accessible health care and having that availability is key for people to be successful in their provinces and raise their happy and healthy families.
And I would just add to that treating our workers with respect is extremely important. And especially after the pandemic, we've seen how hard people work in all different types of sectors, and healthcare included. So I think on the theme of just recognizing the value of the worker, there's several things that the Greens have committed to. So one of them is in terms of health and well-being, also increasing sick days to 10. And also working to ban employers from requiring a sick note from a medical practitioner when an employee is ill. Also things like just restoring and improving workers' rights to collective bargaining. And so an example of that would be the repeal of Bill 124. And also just taking a look as well at, related to this is the treatment of people on things like ODSP, for example. So phasing in a basic income related to this is something else that the Greens would be looking into, and just making sure that we've got meaningful consultation with people who have lived experience that is in any of these areas as well. Something that is interesting and maybe peripherally related to this is just from a policy standpoint and economic metrics standpoint is looking at replacing the GDP as the key metric of government success with an index of well-being to better measure societal progress. This can help in terms of taking some of the pressure off, some of the value-based culture around how hard a worker has to work with respect to changing what the meaning of that is. So things like a well-being index can be used to inform monetary and social policy going forward as well.
Thank you. Would any of the candidates like to use their wild card? If not, we'll be moving on to the next question in the category of transportation. Currently, about 60% of the city's carbon emissions come from the transportation sector, with 80% of those generated by personal automobiles. As stated, the City of Brampton has declared a climate emergency and has set out specific targets to reduce carbon emissions by 30% from a 2015 baseline by the year 2030. Significant carbon reduction from transportation is therefore an essential part of the city's plans. On the other hand, people still need a way to move conveniently, safely, and economically within the city and within the region. Solving this dilemma will likely involve a combination of transportation choices, including ZEVs, transit, micromobility devices, and active transportation. If elected to government, how does your party envision Brampton's transportation future? How would it help with people and goods movement while also allowing Brampton and Peel achieve their carbon emission reduction targets? First, I'll have the Green Party go ahead and then the Liberal Party.
Thank you. As you know, transit and clean transit, as well as affordable, accessible transit, is a huge part of the Green Platform and is something that I've also been very vocal about. So I'd say that, you know, if we were to look at that issue from sort of several vantage points, I'd say just sort of a bird's eye view. I think that ensuring values and narratives around sustainable planning and controlling how or even strategically planning around how communities grow is all part and parcel of how then transit and traffic, et cetera, would flow. So I'd say that that's sort of one kind of starting point that, you know, from a public policy perspective, we would take. Then sort of working down from there, I'd say that it would be using existing infrastructure and making sure that we're using it as efficiently as possible, but also seeing where there's opportunities for growth. So things like expanded all-day two-way go, during peak periods, as well as making sure that, you know, if we do have, a connectivity issue between communities, for example, or people who are moving and have to go between different areas, that you do have clean, affordable, accessible intercity electric bus service and things like that as well. Obviously, stop building unnecessary highways and encouraging sprawl where you could use existing highway infrastructure and things like that to mitigate traffic, which would then make room for alternative modes of transportation. And then with some of the other modes of transportation that were mentioned, also just looking at how current space allocations for, things that we would need, bike lanes, et cetera, or whatever type of routes we would need are also factored into all of the above as well.
Harinder, you can go ahead.
Sorry, I had some background noise from the little one, so I had to mute for a minute. As everyone knows, that the Ontario Liberal Party has committed to a bucket ride for our transit program. We are encouraging people to take public transit, whether it be your local LRT or BRT, whether it be GO Transit. We are trying to get cars off the roads by giving people the option and making it more affordable for them to be able to use these transit systems. We will continue to provide solutions that make the commutes easier. When in government, the Liberals were committed to all-day two-way all-day two-way go every 15 minutes, making it easier for Bramptonians to commute to the city if they need to and back. And with the bucket ride, it will be more affordable, and it will take a commute for the average commuter, anything that costs $260 a month down to $60 a month. So we have been committed to taking cars off the road, and we will remain committed to taking cars off the road and making it easier to travel within our communities. During my previous time at Queen's Park, we also built increasing biking paths throughout the city. We funded a connection between Caledon and Brampton for the bike path there, and we'll continue to advocate for clean projects and clean ways for transportation for our residents.
Thank you. Would any of the candidates like to use their wild card?
I would, if that's okay. I just had something to add with respect to the transit fares. The Greens have also committed to cutting transit in half for at least the first 3 months as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, candidates. I would now like to move on to the healthcare section. Residents of Brampton North are fortunate to have one of the city's only full-service hospital on the riding border. Unfortunately, the hospital seems to always be running over capacity. Average ER wait times often exceed 2 hours. Wait times for surgical procedures such as hip replacement are over twice the provincial average. According to Ontario Health's own website information and the Ontario Nurses Association and the Ontario Association of Physicians and Surgeons indicate that the problem is related as much to staff shortages as it is to funding a second hospital. There are stories of residents of North Brampton who will drive to Orangeville or Georgetown to avoid having to go to Brampton Civic right next door. If your party wins the June election, what would your government do to have Brampton North residents feel better about using their local hospitals for medical care? First, I'll have the Green Party answer and then the Liberal Party.
Thank you. I think that this is a complex but very important question. And I think that, at the very outset, what needs to be evaluated is how funding is allocated first and foremost, looking into ways that care is delivered, where it is delivered, and what part of that is placing strain on the hospital system is also something that needs to be done. So for example, if there's areas where of care, for example, whether it be primary care or perhaps things that people are going to the ER for that could be sort of transitioned with programs or accessible service where people could receive care in place. An example, would be sometimes elderly or where there's complications where people have conditions that bring them into the hospital. Are there other places and supports where we could divert resources so that hospitals are freed up a little bit as well? Obviously, funding and staffing is huge, and as we've seen from the pandemic, frontline workers, health workers are indeed heroes, and they really deserve to be treated as such. And so part of that is, of course, ensuring that we've got enough staff so that there isn't the strain and pressure and burnout for so many frontline workers who are out there every day. So an example would be the Greens have committed to hiring 15,000 new nurses to increase hospital capacity and reduce backlogs, increase or expand family health teams into all communities. So this is also really pivotal because a lot of these family health teams, they actually provide holistic care that often can help in terms of you have a patient where there's a physician that has oversight where they may not need to go to a hospital. They've got access to better care or hours or office hours or whatever the case might be. And then obviously just on the issue of health, mental health as well. Mental health
Thank
is
you,
health.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Harinder, you can go ahead.
Sure. So healthcare has, the pandemic has shown us in more ways than one. We were already in a healthcare crisis prior to the pandemic, and after the pandemic, it has only grown. I do find that we are far behind in many of our services, but like you mentioned, it's going to be a multi-pronged approach to be able to fix our healthcare system. Number one is a big thank you to all of our frontline workers who worked so hard during the pandemic to support our families, to support our loved ones as we went through this crisis, and of course to put themselves on the line. So the first thing that Liberal Ontarians would do is repeal Bill 124. We need to ensure that we respect our nurses and we respect our healthcare professionals and respect the work that they've been doing. We know that the pandemic has hurt the industry. People have been driven out of the industry. And like you said, if we cannot staff a hospital, then obviously having an empty hospital there is not going to be the answer. We saw during the pandemic that the Peel Centre for Integrated Health and Wellness was shut down for 2.5 months under the Ford government because they could not staff it. We cannot continue like this. We need to attract people to the profession. We need to build the 250 beds that should have started in 2018 or 2019, that the Ford government has again put on hold until now, which is an election year. And we are also committed to ending the backlog on diagnostics and surgeries that we've fallen behind in. And we've committed $1 billion to that. We will also hire 100,000 new nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers in order to do that.
Thank you, candidates. Would anyone like to use their wild card on that question?
Yes, I would. That's okay. Thank you. Just to finish quickly, just on the subject of mental health, increasing mental health spending to 10% of the Ontario health budget will help to relieve any crisis situations that end up in ER. In addition to that as well, PSW wage increases to $25, increasing funding to home care services by 20%, and hiring rapidly 5,000 PSWs and 18,000 nurses are just some examples of some of the other initiatives the Greens are committing to.
Thank you. If anyone doesn't have if anyone else wouldn't like to use their wild card, we will be moving on to the next section, which is climate change. As Southern Ontario warms twice as rapidly as the rest of the world, Ontarians are looking for progress on climate change. What are your party's greenhouse gas reduction targets? What are the key elements of your emission reduction plan, including how your party would pay for it and ensure targets are met? First, I'll have the Liberal Party candidate go ahead, and then the Green Party candidate.
I'm sorry, I got caught up in the chat there. Would you be able to repeat the question?
Absolutely. As Southern Ontario warms twice as rapidly as the rest of the world, Ontarians are looking for progress on climate change. What are your party's greenhouse gas reduction targets? What are the key elements of your emission reduction plan, including how your party would pay for it and ensure targets are met?
So as I said earlier, I would encourage everybody to please take a look at to visit OntarioLiberal.ca to read our full plan for addressing the climate crisis. But as I mentioned earlier, we have a proven track record of taking climate change seriously. Please, we will cut Ontario's carbon pollution in half by 2030. We will ban new natural gas plants and transition to a fully clean energy supply, and protect 30% of our land and expand the green belt. We'll also plant 800 million trees. So we are committed to taking responsibility for the climate crisis and continuing to work towards making this a greener province for everybody. I once again encourage you to view our full plan at OntarioLiberal.ca.
Thank you. I would also add that full costing as well as the platform for the Greens is available at gpo.ca. But with respect to the carbon emissions targets, we are talking about real net zero by 2045, and cutting carbon pollution in half by 2030. Now, in terms of some of the ways that just in terms of costing monetary policy, how we would perhaps approach some of this, we would look at possible gas tax rebates, looking at things like reversing the short-sighted decision to eliminate license sticker fees, stop fossil fuel subsidies except for farming and fly-in Indigenous communities, as well as perhaps redirecting energy subsidies to reduce energy poverty and increase energy efficiency. Also looking at ways that, as we start to have a healthier, more responsibly planned infrastructure, if we start to see in the long term the impacts of climate change ravaging our existing infrastructure go down, the mitigation costs alone that we would save could also part and parcel offset what might be needed to put towards programming or policy decisions in this regard going forward as well.
Thank you. Would any of the candidates like to use their wild card for this question? Perfect. Moving on to the next section, housing and affordability. More and more Ontarians are worried about inflation and the rising cost of living, particularly in regards to housing. Climate change is aggravating affordability issues by impacting food supply, challenging our infrastructure, and creating a difficult situation for Ontarians. How would your party mitigate the rising cost of living and ensure that all Ontarians have access to affordable and adequate housing? First, I'll have the Green Party candidate go ahead and then the Liberal Party candidate.
Thank you. For this question, I think what I would like to point to first and foremost is sprawl. I think that by controlling how we are building towards the urban boundary, which should be frozen, we can very much make a positive dent in the direction that prices are going in terms of having all of this single family dwellings just going on as far as the eye can see, instead of building within the existing boundaries and existing lands and the missing middle and things like that, so that there are a variety of options available to people who are looking to buy a home. I think that all of this would then take a lot of strain and pressure off the system, and things also like protecting families and Ontarians, people that we're building homes for, reducing the presence of speculators in the market and things like that as well, so that over time we start to see that pressure and that inflation, that pressure on pricing go down. So from my perspective, it all starts from the planning and the allocation of where we're placing things in communities. And as we start to see more well-planned 15-minute communities with zoning, et cetera, and commensurate changes made in those areas, you'll start to see improvements in affordability as well.
So when we talk about affordability, we have taken a pillared approach to it. Once again, there's many pillars of affordability that the Ontario Liberals are focused on. When we talk about housing, we are committed to helping bring the market back down to an affordable place where everybody in Ontario who works for hard can afford a home, can afford a place to live for their family. As we've seen under the watch of Doug Ford and the Conservatives, it's been clear that prices have gone up by almost $500,000 over the last 4 years, and nothing has been done to slow that down as we went along. The Ontario Liberals are committed to building 1.5 million new homes and creating 150,000 jobs per year. And we will make sure that the province is a true partner in building affordable homes and empower local governments to build more homes by giving them the tools that they need. We'll also improve housing for people who need that extra support, and when we have obviously committed to ending chronic homelessness.
Thank you, candidates. Would anyone like to use their wild card? Thank you. I'll be moving on to the next question now on the topic of reconciliation and just transition. Negative environmental impacts that cause the loss of ecosystem services are especially harsh on Indigenous and ethnic communities, as well as the poor and homeless. What needs to happen to reverse this trend? And what will you and your party do to minimize these societal impacts and create a more green transition? First, I'll have the Liberal Party candidate answer and then the Green Party candidate.
Okay, so the current Ford government has plans for resource extraction in the north, but only the Ontario Liberals will work with and not against the wishes of local Indigenous communities to ensure that we do this responsibly.
And I would just say that things like environmental justice and consultation collaboration is hugely important. So I know that the Greens will make sure that there are appropriate assessments done, that there are the right consultations in place. I mean, so for example, we've all heard about the 413, and we're being told that the residents, and it's going to go right through Brampton North or Central Brampton as well, and just all the way up into Caledon, and we've been told that the residents feel want this. And I've seen statistics that say anywhere from 29 to only 34% actually do. So it makes you wonder, are these democratic ways to ensure that people are being consulted about what's happening in their communities and marginalized communities? Is it actually happening? In addition to that, the Greens are proposing strengthening and upholding the Environmental Bill of Rights, as well as also ensuring requiring the Ministry of the Environment to develop and report on a strategy to address environmental racism. These are just some examples, but others would include more stricter monitoring and enforcement standards for air and water pollution, and as well as health risks, and also just making sure that if there is any sort of impact on Crown lands, that that's taken into consideration responsibly and respectfully, and make sure that all the necessary assessments are done as well.
Thank you, candidates. Would anyone like to use their wild card? Sounds good. I will move on to the next section, which is resources. Question is, the expansion in cement production and highway construction has driven an increase in gravel mining sites across Ontario. Local communities have noted that the massive land and water use required for gravel mining threatens endangered species, risks groundwater contamination, and increases GHG emissions. Given these impacts, will your party commit to consulting with Indigenous and affected communities, and if necessary, limit further expansion of gravel pits and quarries? Why or why not? First, I'll have the Green Party candidate answer and then the Liberal Party candidate.
Thank you. So I'd say just building on what I was saying earlier with respect to collaboration and consultation, this would absolutely be part of that commitment as well. But I'd say that the Greens have actually already asked for, previously a complete moratorium on gravel mining until it can be determined how much the province actually needs. We know that it uses huge amounts of water, and it's obviously extremely bad for a lot of reasons, environment, et cetera. So just ensuring that we have the tools in place to evaluate what's necessary before we proceed with determining, how much of this is going to be needed in our foreseeable future, what alternatives are there.
Okay. So aggregate resources are an important aspect of economic development, but any further expansion here or anywhere in the province must really adhere to the highest of environmental standards. The Ford campaign has based its slogan on saying yes to everything. We again know that it is not the way to build strong, inclusive societies that protect our watersheds and the land around them, nor is it a way to build partnerships with our local Indigenous groups. Ontario Liberals know how to build an Ontario for the 21st century, but both the Ontario PCs and the NDP are stuck with antiquated 20th century ideas that won't put Ontario as a global leader in the fight against human-caused climate change.
Thank you, candidates. Would anyone like to use their wild card? That sounds good. We will now be moving on to audience questions. Just a reminder, if you would like to submit a question, you can submit it at the bottom of your screen in the Q&A feature. The first question is, as the 9th biggest city in Canada with no large independent post-secondary institutions, would you support a Brampton University? The development and construction of a Brampton University? Many Bramptonians end up applying their skills and talents and developing their skills outside of the city, causing a brain drain. Harinder, go ahead.
Okay. Ontario Liberals have always been committed to a post-secondary institution, a university in Brampton. This is another project that was cancelled by the Ford government when they were elected in 2018. The project was well on the way with then Ryerson, now Metropolitan Toronto University, and we were ready to start moving that project along. We had an agreement in place, and the project had been approved. Unfortunately, the Ford government came and canceled it, and we will continue to support those projects. We'll continue to support having a university in Brampton and working with stakeholders and partners to get that done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would say that the Greens have committed to reevaluating the funding formula and looking at how we're allocating funding towards post-secondary education. Obviously, if there are avenues to improve access to education with respect to physical space, perhaps in tandem with innovation hubs or existing infrastructure, that's certainly something I'm sure that would fall under the purview of what the Greens have committed to. I think overarching though, the accessibility to education, removing barriers to it, including things like tuition incentives for people as well, is something that the Greens have committed to. So I'd say there's definitely opportunities here to see if there could be possible additional post-secondary education access in the area. But in terms of what the Greens have committed to, I'd say it's part and parcel of the total sort of picture that we're advocating for.
Thank you, candidates. The next question is, how do your respective parties deal with the already approved Peel plan to expand the urban boundary? And also, how do your respective parties define affordable and sustainable?
Any particular order or?
You can go ahead with the first question.
Thank you. So in terms of the urban boundary, yes, absolutely freeze it. And the reason for that is that it's not a matter of taking something away or negating development. There's ways to develop responsibly within existing boundaries. There's land that can be used. There's infrastructure that can be repurposed, and in doing so, you're also forcing reliable infrastructure like transit, walkability, and things like that to be included in the planning of things like 15-minute communities and things like that, changing the type of housing that's available to people as well. So, there are folks that would want single family dwellings, and there's also people that would, want maybe triplexes or, things like that as well. So you can have something called gentle density, which is built up within existing borders. So, I feel that the urban boundary conversation gets sometimes, mixed in with that. There's no need at this point in time to eat into irreplaceable farmland and wetland when we can still have the development we need, which could benefit the community, within our existing borders. With respect to affordability and sustainability, I'd say that, being able to, we're talking about purchasing parity, but, we're also talking about just the cost of living, right? So affordability to me would fall under that umbrella. Now the rising prices of everything. I mean, people are filling up gas tanks for hundreds of dollars, things like that, groceries, etc., just transit and things that are hiking in tandem with inflation. But also sustainability, I'd say, is the longevity of the system that we put in place. So for me, that means that can apply to a lot of different things, right? The environment, community planning, but also I think that sustainability can also, in a way, be taken as, I guess, sort of almost an offshoot of affordability, in the sense that if you have a system that's working and things are affordable, then that can be sustainable as well.
Thank you. Harinder, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. And I'm just going to ask for the question to be repeated again.
Absolutely. So how would your respective party deal with the already approved Peel plan to expand the urban boundary? And then how do your respective parties define affordable and sustainable?
I think when we talk about the urban boundary, we will have to consult with the municipalities involved before making a decision on whether how to move forward. I think it's important that we work with all stakeholders and partners involved when making these decisions and allowing municipalities to offer their input. When we talk about affordability is people who work hard being able to maintain to be living above the poverty line, right? It's people who are working to put food on the table and being able to buy that food, being able to get from point A to point B, whether it be using transit, whether it be using a vehicle, whatever, and it's just maintain, and the cost of food, of course, right? The cost of food is key, and that's why we've committed to providing relief for when purchasing a ready-made meal or pre-cooked or a cooked meal, because we know how hard it is for families to make ends meet. We know how hard it is for working families, right? You're on your way home that one day, you know, dinner's not always going to be ready when you get home from a long day, and it's so easy to pick up something as simple as a pizza or that cup of coffee that you've missed making in the morning. And all of that little stuff adds up to making life more, and saving the HST or the Ontario portion of HST on that all saves up, all adds up to savings for our residents. And when we talk about sustainability, we want to talk about, like, once again, how we can maintain that that cost of living or that affordability for people, how it can be something that last us in the long run, how they can continue to sustain their households based on the expenses that they're incurring.
Thank you. Now, the next question is, how would both of your respective parties work to address the issue of people on disability and Ontarians with disabilities and finding work and having a sustainable wage?
I can start if you like. Yeah, so I was just going to say that, here consultation and collaboration is absolutely important. Making sure that we have meaningful consultation and conversation with people who have a lived experience in terms of, not being able to make ends meet while, living with a disability as well, and experiencing poverty, and what their experience has been like with the existing social assistance programs and the design of these programs. And so looking at client-centered approaches for reducing poverty as well. And we've already talked about making sure that there is a basic income as well. But just things like also looking at things like if people in desperation have to reach out for loans and things like that, which could disproportionately affect one part of the population versus another, depending on the barriers they have to accessing social assistance or services and things like that. Prohibit things like payday lending that takes advantage of those who are facing financial hardship and vulnerable, and just things like that. These are some examples, and also just maybe working forward to try to annually report on data about the proportion of the population that is experiencing chronic homelessness or unmet health needs, food insecurity, things like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Ontario Liberals are committed to increasing ODSP by 20%. We know that the cost of living is going up, and it's only fair that everybody, people on ODSP still have to go out and endure the same cost of the hikes in the cost of living. They still have to put food on their table. So we cannot leave them with that same small amount of money and when they need the extra support. We need to be able to bring our communities with us, and we need to support our most vulnerable communities. From somebody who's worked in the not-for-profit sector for the last 3.5 years, serving our most vulnerable, I 100% believe that it's so very important for us to move forward as a community and supporting everybody in that community. We will once again make sure that we bring back the basic income pilot so that everybody has that ability to come live above the poverty line, live above, at least have the affordability to go out and put food on the table. It's not fair to leave anybody behind. We want a province where everybody has equitable opportunities, and we want to make this an inclusive community. So we must support those in need and those that are most vulnerable in our communities.
Thank you. Now the next question is, Ontario follows the first past the post system where a party could form majority government with as little as 35% votes when fully 2/3 voted against it. Do you see this as a corroding public trust in our government? Do you see any credibility problems? And do you support proportional representation electoral systems? Why or why not? First, I'll have Harinder answer, and then Aneep, you can go ahead.
Our political system, I do support electoral reform because we are seeing that. We're seeing that across the province. We're seeing that you don't need more than 50% of the vote to win. So you're looking at 30, as you said, 35, with 35% of the vote, a candidate is able to win when the progressive thought process or the residents out there actually don't, a majority of the residents in that space, in that area, or in that constituency, or across the province, really don't agree with the views of the government. So electoral reform is important, and I think we should work towards finding better representation, finding a way and proportional representation at our provincial level and our municipal level, so that we have the best possible interests of a majority of the citizens represented.
And I would just say that absolutely democratic reform is something that is a priority for the Greens. You know, some of the mechanisms that we would look into putting in place as a way of working towards our goals in that arena are things like having a diverse, randomly selected citizens assembly on electoral reform with a mandate to provide binding recommendations on modernizing Ontario's electoral system to ensure that every vote counts and that the legislature reflects the democratic will of the people. Also the option of possibly rather allowing the municipalities the option to use a ranked ballot voting system for elections, and maybe looking at creating limits for municipal elections whereby no person may contribute more than 1,000 to all candidates combined. Just looking at other things like donation limits for provincial political parties candidates, constituency associations, restoring the Auditor General's oversight of government advertising, and things like that are just some of the examples, but absolutely a collaborative approach to protecting voter rights and empowering citizens is something that the Greens are advocating for, definitely.
Thank you, candidates. Now, our last question is, if elected, what would be your first few actions in office? I'll have Aneep answer, and then Harinder, you can go ahead.
I think that I would want to get to work very quickly on taking a full comprehensive review of what's happened in the last 4 years, and then of course work efficiently towards fulfilling the promises in the platform and identifying what are the specific prioritized needs of the riding as well, and then getting to work on communicating, collaborating with our community, making sure that those consultations, that open dialogue and that transparency starts right away. Obviously, green priorities are going to be paramount, affordability as well, and then just maybe working towards ensuring that this electorate, or the constituency, our residents, voters, everybody is aware of the work that's going on, and reporting on goals as they're achieved as well.
The priorities, there's many priorities when you're first elected, and you have an opportunity to really influence the change and to raise the priorities and the voice of your constituents, especially your specific constituents of your riding there. And it's a time to take in everything you're hearing, look at your platform pieces, look at your commitments, and figure out with your party collaboratively how you're going to move forward on these commitments. There's also an opportunity to engage your community. You are the voice of your community. You represent the needs of your community, and it is so very important to ensure that you engage as many members of that community as possible. It's a part of being a grassroots community leader and wanting to build your community up. So I would take that opportunity to consult, to work with the community, and to ensure that we're providing, that I am voicing the concerns of the residents of Brampton North at Queen's Park and in the legislature. Not only just voicing those concerns, but raising them every opportunity I get to ensure that we see action, we see change, and we deliver our priorities like healthcare, education, and affordability.
Thank you, candidates. I would like to thank everyone. I would also like to next give it off to the candidates to do any closing remarks if they have any. First, I'll have Harinder, and then Aneep, you can go ahead. You have 3 minutes to do these closing remarks.
Okay, 3 minutes, that's a long time. But I would like to thank all of you for being here on the panel today and for providing us, well, at least Aneep and I, a forum to share our ideas. I want to thank Aneep for some wonderful ideas that she's brought to the table. And I think that working collaboratively on ideas is always the best way to move forward. I've had an opportunity for the second time today to be the only two candidates in Brampton North that felt it was important to share our opinions and our views on issues. So, and to attend forums like these two debates that we've had today. I also want to say that this election is about the things that we've seen happen in the last 4 years, the delays in the projects that we've seen in the last 4 years, whether it be healthcare or the mess that has been made of education by the Doug Ford government, or affordability, the housing market. These are all things that happened under the watch of the Conservatives. Brampton North elected an NDP MPP in the last election, and we see that that experiment has failed because we did not have somebody to voice our opinions. And now I think for me, this election is about advocating, it's about delivering, and it's about proven leadership. What I bring to the table as an individual is a track record of proven leadership and being a lifelong learner, listening to my community, listening to the needs of my community, and being a community builder. I commit to the residents of Brampton North that if elected on June the 2nd, I will work hard and I will work diligently to be your voice at Queen's Park to raise the issues that matter most to you. So with that, I will say thank you once again. And I will also say, please consider voting for the Ontario Liberal Party in Brampton North on June the 2nd. I look forward to your support. I look forward to being your voice at Queen's Park. Thank you.
And thank you as well for this opportunity. It's been an absolute privilege. I have to say I did have the pleasure of meeting her for the first time this morning at a debate. So it is nice to see you. And you know, I agree that in the last 4 years, we have not seen what we need as a community. It is time for a change, and it is an opportunity here to vote differently. Part of the democratic process is having that type of representation in office. We need to get more people in power that have the values that will affirm the changes that we're looking into. So if we're talking about working towards a green climate economy, if we're working towards affordability and sustainable planning, then we need to start thinking green, and we need to get more Greens into office. Now, I'll say, you know, in terms of my experience and you know, my passion for the community, I have worked for several charities and I've worked in the community as well. And that sort of led me on the path that, you know, ended up here as well. But what I would say also is I think I have a perspective that allows me to see what happens behind the scenes once a party is in power. And so informing the public policy process with the right values is extremely important. Having voices in the legislature that can represent the interests of a riding and also be voices of dissent or voices towards, you know, against the status quo is extremely important. You know, I've been able to see how the levers of government, the mechanics of policy work from that level down, and how changes and programs actually become implemented. And so it's so important that we get these green values into office. Now, I think that you know, we have an opportunity here to make a choice, and you know, elections are about choices. And I think that the chance here, there's a very big one in the region, or in the riding, well, in particular in the riding, to make a statement and be different. Choose differently, choose towards a green future, choose towards an inclusive, caring society, a properly planned society. I mean, the basic needs of a community of people, health, access to affordable cost of living, being able to get around, not worrying about the future. It's disgraceful that we have to advocate so much to just get where we should be entitled to as Ontarians and be entitled to as residents. I always say, when you see the congestion growing and you see the city growing, you don't see commensurate infrastructure in place for you, then an alarm should go off. Why isn't that happening? So, the Greens approach politics differently. They also look at working across party lines to just get change done. So, with that in mind, I would say I would implore you to consider voting Green. And if elected, I know that I'll bring everything that I have talked about today in the best capacity I can forward. I'll advocate very passionately for the riding, and also just for a change in how we approach politics and how we work towards a better future for everyone.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the candidates, and thank you everyone for coming. These debates are very much important to the electoral process. Having the community members connect with the candidates and hear from them and their party platforms is incredibly important. And putting the environment front and center in the Ontario election is something that's not only important, but it's needed at this point. So I guess thank you all for coming, and I hope this was an informative experience for everyone. Before you leave, we'd like to remind everyone to quickly fill out our feedback form. You can either scan the QR on this slide, or you can click the link that's being pasted in the chat. Also, reminder that any audience submitted questions that went unanswered during today's debate will be sent to the candidates after the conclusion of the debate. Thank you so much, everyone, and to our partners for making this debate happen. Have a great rest of your night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Iman. It was really wonderful.
Thanks so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, and it was amazing. And we had almost up to 27, 28 people. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Right.